This is part 2 of our 2-part podcast breaking down the Terry Rozier trade. Make sure you check out part 1 for our immediate reactions to the trade and how Terry Rozier can help the Heat. We talk about the end of Kyle Lowry's tenure in Miami. After we went live for the show, we took questions from our listeners about more trade targets before the trade deadline and what comes next for the Heat. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're already going long, but we have a lot of people tuning in live, submitting questions. So are you down to just kind of answer some of these questions? Let's go bonus overtime here for a Terry Rozier breaking news podcast.
Listening in about Terry Rozier. Who knew? Who knew that Terry Rozier was that popular?
Wes heads are showing up. The David heads are showing up. All the Locked On Heat everydayers are showing up. I love this in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. You mentioned
does nobody work 9 to 5 anymore.
Not when Terry Rozier got traded to the Heat. Everything stops. Everything stops. We talked a little bit about this, and I want to get to it before we get to some of these other names and moves that could be made now between now and the deadline. But Enzo writes in, what's the optimal starting lineup right now? I think it's a very interesting question. Let's just say Terry Rozier's here. Everybody's healthy. And I'm gonna throw Jaime Jaquez Jr. into that mix too. Let's just assume that when he's healthy, gets back from this groin strain, everybody's healthy. Optimal starting lineup. I think you start Terry Rozier because of that rim pressure. I think you have him. I think Tyler Hero is still the starter. I don't think you move him to the bench. And like you said, I know that some Heat fans have an issue with Tyler Hero. That's always going to be a case and whatever. But Tyler Hero is starting. I don't know what else to tell you at this point. There's been enough evidence here that Tyler Hero is a full-time starter as long as he's a member of the Miami Heat. It's just happening. So you've got Terry Rozier and you got Tyler Hero starting in your backcourt, which I quite like. I don't think it's as bad as defensively as maybe the reputation is. It's not great defensively, but it's not going to be as bad. It's not as small as people think. Tyler Hero's bigger than people believe. He's 6'5". Tyler Hero's a big guy. His wingspan's a negative, but he's tall. Terry Rozier's wingspan of almost 6'9". That's a good wingspan. So I think they could do some things. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. Who's the 4? Who needs to start at forward there with that group? At power forward.
To me, it's Haywood Highsmith. I think that's the obvious choice. As much as
I like it.
I like the possibility of Martin, but obviously I like the potential of Jovic and what he can bring. I know, and now he'll have a backcourt partner in which to push the pace a little bit more. But I think if you're looking for balance and you're looking for the right, combination of players, a guy who doesn't need the ball and who's another outlet option in terms of, let's say, Tyler drives to the rim, and then you've got a cutting Terry Rozier playing off ball, and then he gets defended well. He's looking for an opportunity to kick the ball out to the perimeter. And you've got Haywood Highsmith, who's good from the elbow. He's good from the corners. He can pop that shot. He looks like he's comfortable and getting better in terms of being able to be a reliable three-point shooter. And he brings defense at a high level. Again, you're going to be undersized unless you make a trade. So to me, why not at least get a high level, if not elite level defender in there, a guy who doesn't need the ball very much and who won't grumble about minutes or opportunity or anything like that, because he's just happy to be out on the floor for now.
It's a great point. The fact that he doesn't need the ball, because Rozier needs the ball. Hero needs the ball. Jimmy needs the ball. Bam needs the ball. I think the shine on Jovic has worn a little bit since he started 10 games in a row. I still like him as a long-term prospect. I just don't know that he's been that helpful in terms of being a starter. He hasn't been hurt. He hasn't been bad. I just don't know that, whatever. I don't know why I keep apologizing for this, but it's fine. But the other part about trading Kyle Lowry and putting a offensive threat in that starting lineup is now you can afford to start Haywood Highsmith, who's not really a threat with the ball in his hands. Like you said, the most threatening he is from the corners. Nobody guards him above the break. Nobody, you're only guarding him and only kind of from the corners, but he can make that shot. It's very PJ Tucker-esque. Nobody guarded PJ Tucker, even though he's making the shot at like a 50% clip from the corner. Nobody guarded him. Haywood Highsmith can at least provide that, plus the defensive stuff that you mentioned, which is really why he's in there. So I think that's the starting 5. I think you nailed it. I think that's it. Because now that you don't have Lowry, you can afford to start Haywood Highsmith. Because instead of having 2 non-factors on offense in that starting group with Lowry and Highsmith, you only have 1. And you can afford 1. In fact, from a fit perspective, it might be best to have 1 because those other 4 guys need the ball, to your point. So I think you nailed it. I think that's your starting 5. And that brings, assuming Jaime's healthy, when he gets healthy, Jaime off the bench, Duncan Robinson off the bench. I think Kevin Love is still your backup center. And I think that's your top 8. Oh, and Caleb Martin. That's your top 9. That's your top 9. And then you see where Josh Richardson fits in. You see where Nikola Jovic fits in. You kind of see if there's a Thomas Bryant or Orlando Robinson matchup, etc. But I like Love, Caleb, Jaime, and Duncan off the bench as your top 9.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I think you kind of stagger the minutes a little bit. Maybe take Tyler and Bam out early, bring Kevin Love and Duncan into that mix, and then let Tyler cook lineups with him and Caleb Martin on the wing, and you get Bam back in there as well. Those could be that kind of balance across the roster that you're looking for. So there's a lot of different options there too. And again, we're forgetting Jaime Jaquez, who has been such a spark too. He can play with virtually any lineup. So I don't think there's been I wouldn't say that there's he could start and he's come off the bench and he's had the same level of impact in both cases. So I'm not concerned about his role or fit on either one of those lineups.
Isaac writes in, if this is the only trade that the Heat do for this season, would that be enough, in your opinion, for the team? What?
Enough for what?
I don't know. Enough for you. Enough in your opinion.
And that's.
Would you be disappointed?
Have to quantify that.
Let's not play the results here. If they just make the Terry Rozier move and they keep the rest of the team the way it is between now and the deadline, would you be disappointed?
No,
I'll reframe the question. I would not either.
Yeah, I think they would be having made an attempt to improve this roster and recognizing that's a level of self-awareness that I think a lot of people question about the Miami front office and poorly in doing so, because obviously this front office has been very, very good and been one of the best for decades. So they've earned the benefit of the doubt. Having said that, it's also not easy to pull the trigger on these kinds of things, because I think there is a sense of loyalty to players. As much as you want to make moves to improve your roster, like you signed in Kyle, and I don't think it was bluster. I don't think it was hyperbole. I don't think that, when Eric Spoelstra talked about QB1 and about the impact of Kyle and the moments he had in the postseason over the last couple of seasons, I think there was genuine respect there. So it's not easy to make these moves, but they recognized, look, we can't do this anymore. It's just not working, and we've got to try to do something better and bigger. And so to make that move, I'm very proud of the front office for making that kind of acquisition and recognizing we need to do something different. I just don't, these moves are also difficult to make. Like we talk about this all the time. Like, guys go on the, the armchair general manager and, enter some names and numbers. And it's like, oh, I could pull this trade off easily. That's not how it works. It takes.
Is it a little disappointing given that this could have been Damian Lillard or Drew Holiday?
I mean, sure, I guess, but that you can go down the road on so many different acquisitions like that, either free agency or the draft. It's like, oh, they should never have taken Michael Beasley in 2008. They should have just taken Kevin Love then, and they would have had their front court. They could have had Russell Westbrook playing alongside Dwayne Wade.
I mean, Hero would have been involved in a Dame trade or Drew Holiday trade. So you keep Tyler Hero in this, and you get a good starting point guard in Terry Rozier, who's maybe like among the top 100 players in the NBA. He's probably between 90 and 100. Terry Rozier.
Yep.
But that's better than where they were with Kyle Lowry. It is.
Yep.
Kyle Lowry wasn't a top 100 player in the NBA anymore.
I think
so.
To say enough, to kind of look at it from the original question. Like, yes, again, it's going to take a lot. You're getting a boost from Rozier. You still have to wait and see what Tyler can do in the playoff and see whether these three players can maximize their respective games at a time when it matters most. And I think bigger question of all, can Jimmy Butler be Jimmy Butler? If those factors all align the way that they did last season and the year before that and 2 seasons before that, then yeah. I mean,
and Rozier's a guy who can help with the scoring burden in the regular season. The point that I made yesterday was that the Miami Heat the Miami Heat have a postseason superstar. They don't have a regular season superstar. Terry Rozier is not a regular season superstar. I'm not saying that, but he can at least put 20 points per game up, right? And they just needed one other guy who could just explode for 25 points on any given night, 30 points on any given night. They just didn't have enough of those guys because Jimmy Butler really isn't that guy, but for once every week and a half or so. Let's get to a few more questions here. Will the Heat make another move before the deadline? You and I think that they're going to seriously explore it. It's hard to know whether, like you were talking about before, it's hard to predict these things. There's a lot of work that goes into making these deals, but I think that they're going to aggressively explore that. And that's part of the reason that they made a trade now, as opposed to waiting until February. The other reason was that the Kyle Lowry thing was just untenable. They had to get out of that situation, but and that Terry Rozier is a good player who they like. But yeah, I think we can safely say here, and this isn't guessing, the Heat are going to aggressively look at other moves that can help this team between now and the trade deadline. What does that move look like? How about this? Duncan Caleb and a second for Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal.
I don't think that solves the situation. Like, I mean, as good as Dorian Finney-Smith is shooting from the perimeter, I just don't think he's going to provide the same thing that Duncan does as a viable shooter and guy who can create off ball.
You're comparing Finney-Smith to one of the best shooters in the league, though.
Yeah, but I mean, Doe's having a great year. He's shooting really well. I just think that's all fine, but I think that also creates a glut positionally too. Like, you're going to have these defensive-minded wings too. You're basically trading Caleb for Royce O'Neal, and that's kind of like an even swap. But you're also giving up on, to your point, a really good 3-point shooter and another guy who's is having a good 3-point shooting year. And I think that's basically where it is. I mean, I like the idea of Dorian Finney-Smith in Miami. I just don't know if I'd be willing to trade Duncan Robinson for him too, though, if that makes any sense.
So Finney-Smith is a career 36% 3-point shooter. He's shooting 38.6% from 3-point range this season. Overall, he's shooting 43% from the corners, which is borderline elite. Not quite elite, but borderline elite. I love Dorian Finney-Smith. If I'm the Miami Heat, that's my target. That's the guy I'm looking at.
Really?
It is. I think he's a good player on a very good contract. Starting at power forward, 6'7" with a near 7-foot wingspan. If you want to talk about what Haywood Highsmith gives you, like, Haywood Highsmith's evolved form is Dorian Finney-Smith. If Haywood Highsmith is Charmander, Dorian Finney-Smith is Charizard. Okay, I know you don't understand that reference, but some people on YouTube do. Like, that to me is a Heat type player that makes sense, who's under contract for another year, under team control, $13 to $14 million a year. I would really hesitate to move Duncan Robinson in a deal for Dorian Finney-Smith. The Royce O'Neal thing to me versus Caleb Martin is like you said, I don't care. But if I could find a way to build Caleb Martin and some other salaries to get to a Dorian Finney-Smith or something, I don't know what the trade looks like, but that's a guy who makes a lot of sense to me in terms of a Miami Heat fit. And it's a name that I think the Heat should seriously explore. The Nets are reportedly looking for 2 first-round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith when pigs fly. That's not going to happen. But I don't know. Does it cost you Nikola Jovic? If it does, is that the kind of move that you'd be willing to make? I don't know. I think the Heat are I think there's certain parts of the Heat's front office that are very high on Nikola Jovic. I don't know that they'd be willing to move him for Dorian Finney-Smith. But if the goal is to make win now moves, there's no doubt that Finney-Smith helps you more right now than Jovic does. So I don't know. Yeah. I think it's an interesting name. It's a name I really like. It doesn't mean that that's going to happen. Kyle writes in, what would it take to get somebody like Jeremy Grant? All the reporting out of Portland right now, and I've heard the same thing, is that they're actually really happy with Jeremy Grant. They're not looking to move him, and that Jeremy Grant's really happy just putting up points and living in Portland for a while and cashing in. So I don't know that Jeremy Grant's really a name.
It's not a bad place to live. I wouldn't mind, getting a big paycheck just to live in Portland for a little bit. I mean, the cold's been brutal there, but aside from that, it's not a bad way to live. So he's happy. He's fine.
Is Larry Markkinen a possibility? No, not with one available first-round pick, at least. If the Jazz were seriously going to field offers for Larry Markkinen, they could probably get 3 first-round picks for him at this point.
And I don't think they are. Like, they're playing really well. Like, I don't.
Why would they?
Yeah. I think they're going to try and compete for a playoff spot. I mean, they've been better than the Lakers, who are like active in every possible trade scenario. And so I think there's no reason to trade a young all-star who seems to be flourishing there, unless you're going to get a truckload of players and picks, and Miami just doesn't have either of those to offer.
Maybe not Charizard for Dorian Finney-Smith, but maybe more of a Charmeleon.
You're stuck on this.
Somebody in the comments was like, did you really say Charizard? Yeah, I said Charizard, but maybe more of a Charmeleon. How about Kelly Olynyk talking about the Utah Jazz? That's a name that I really like. If you look at the names, because all the things you just said about the Jazz are absolutely true. Like, I don't know why they would make a move. That team looks really good. Even like a name like Colin Sexton, who I think the Heat have liked in the past, and I think Heat fans like, I love Colin Sexton. I'm a big Colin Sexton fan. I don't know why they would trade him. They started making this run when they put him in the starting lineup. Keep him. They're not trading Colin Sexton. So, but like a Talen Horton-Tucker, a Jordan Clarkson, a Kelly Olynyk, like these are some of those fringe role players that I could see them moving for the right price. I would welcome Kelly Olynyk back to Miami. I think that's a player that could help. Obviously, I don't need to sell Heat fans on the Kelly Olynyk vision. They've watched him up close in person, but can shoot threes, handle the ball, Not a great rebounder. Defensively leaves a lot of meat on the bone, but could be helpful for this team. What does it cost? His contract at about $12 million. It's really tough to get to. So that's why I would say it's probably not going to happen, because I just don't see a way that the Heat can match that salary without sending Duncan Robinson out. And I don't think that you move Duncan Robinson for Kelly Olynyk.
No, I don't either. I don't know. There's got to be another young level player, a guy or a veteran, a minimum making veteran. I could be in that wheelhouse, but those guys generally aren't needle movers either. I don't know. I'm trying to think about the possibilities there, and where we're ranking Duncan Robinson, I think, is where the front office has him too. Like, he's a very good player at this point. Like 2 years ago, that was a very different conversation. But right now, considering what he's brought to the table in the postseason, the maturity he's shown, the adaptation and versatility to his game that he's added, I think that makes him much more of a functional player. He's not untouchable. I mean, despite what we kind of talked about with Jake Fisher a couple of weeks ago, or last week rather, I don't think he's really untouchable. I just think you'd have to move him for a very, high quality player that can at least alleviate the loss of some of that 3-point shooting.
Ideal trade target, in your opinion? This is kind of what we're talking about here. I don't know that there's going to be another big move unless the Heat do decide to maybe move one of these bigger contracts. I don't know who's available. Like, let's say they even put Duncan Robinson up on the trade block. Like, what are you getting back for him that's at that salary range, right? We're looking at the names that are out there in that range. It's D'Angelo Russell. You're not doing that, right? Not doing that. Like, I don't know. Does the Chicago Bulls continue to fall in the standings? Do they make a guy like Nikola Vucevic available? I don't know. Maybe. Is that really the move for Miami? I like Vucevic. I know you like Vucevic. Yeah. I just, that would be at least one I would explore, but he's not even on the market right now. They're still caught up in trying to trade Zach LaVine. So we'll see what's going on with that.
Somebody in Detroit or San Antonio. Like, I'm thinking Zach Collins, maybe. I think he'd be a nice.
So Zach Collins can't get. So a weird thing with Zach Collins' contract is he can't get traded. And I looked it up the other day and I can't remember why, but he can't get traded.
Because you want him on this team. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and the NBA is
Collins guy coming out of the draft.
I was. Bojan Bogdanovic, but he's making $20 million. So unless you're willing to move Duncan, and I don't know that that's the swap that you're looking at, that makes much sense. But I think, look, if you're looking for power forward help, it might be the buyout market. Let's not discount that. The Heat also have a $9.4 million trade exception from the Victor Oladipo trade. Now, I don't think that they're going to use that because of where they are relative to the luxury tax. But if they make another cap-saving move between now and the deadline, then maybe, depending on how much money they save, that becomes more of an option. But now we're talking about like 2 and 3 steps down the road. Is there something to give in Toronto with like a Thad Young or an Otto Porter? Again, I know not needle movers here, not exciting names, but this is kind of what we're talking about in terms of
an area of need.
An area
Jeff Green in Houston. Depth. Jeff Green, like Miami,
interesting. Is he willing to?
The only team they haven't played it, and he lives here. He lives in South Florida. I'm surprised he hasn't kicked the tires. Yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't kicked the tires on signing here. But it seems like the one team he hasn't played for.
If they buy him out, I just don't know that they would buy him out. They really like him, and that they kind of brought him to try to trade him. So maybe they put him in. So they could trade Jeff Green in a bigger deal. I think Houston's going to be pretty aggressive between now and the deadline. And so if they trade Jeff Green and then he gets bought out, that's somebody who does make little enough money now where if he were to get bought out. But again, Jeff Green is like a nice player. I don't think he's playing for you in a playoff series, right? And so I think you're looking for, maybe. He played for the final. He played for the Nuggets in the finals. But like in terms of a closing 5, I don't know that that's the guy. So I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be interesting. The Heat still open for business even after this Terry Rozier deal. We'll be back with you Wednesday night after the Memphis Grizzlies game with reactions. Hopefully, our first thoughts on what Terry Rozier looks like in a Miami Heat uniform. We'll see what happens there. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast